welcome back from your break, everybody. I hope you had a chance to get a snack and talk amongst yourselves about cybersecurity and Uber. I'd like to continue to discuss today the various specific functions of the corporate legal department. Our next panel will talk about some of the key considerations in bringing about an effective litigation team. First, I'll introduce our moderator, Darby Green, the Commercial Director for Litigation and Bankruptcy at Bloomberg Law. Next on the panel, Jamie Berry, Managing Director of Litigation Services for Integrion. Joshua A. Jessen, Partner at Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. Catherine McDaniel, Senior Litigation Counsel at T-Mobile. And Clinton Miao, Assistant General Counsel and Head of Litigation at Sunrun, Inc. Darby, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, I'll let Clinton get on. And thank you, Susie, for that introduction. As Susie just mentioned, today we're going to be talking about the role of in-house counsel as not just legal leadership, but as business leaders. And as things are transforming or have been transforming over the past couple of years with more work coming in-house, tighter budgets, more requirements about clients not wanting to pay for rote sort of tasks, how that transformation has played out for all these folks across the variety of different areas. So with that, welcoming here, we have from in-house, we have Clinton and Catherine, we have from large law, Josh, and we have from vendor services, Jamie. So to sort of think about how that plays out in all regards. So with that, I think we'll start the conversation with really that question: How are you handling this shift across the industry? And maybe we can start down there with in-house and just give it a little sense.
Sure. So much like I think a lot of companies out there, we've seen a transition where you're bringing a lot more litigation in-house. And we're obviously reacting to that by ramping up staff, both attorney and not attorney. I actually think it's important, though, to sort of dig into some of the reasons why we're seeing some of that transition happen. In an environment of ever-increasing rates and ever-increasing associate salaries, with the move most recently to $190,000 for a first-year associate, and what I'm seeing is about $40,000 a month for an eighth-year associate. Big law firms are basically no longer positioning themselves to handle what companies like ours are seeing on a day-to-day basis. And so with that sort of positioning up in the market, we are, seeing a demand and a need to bring much more of that in-house. And where we're really emphasizing staffing there is with pre-litigation reaction to mostly customer complaints and things like that, where you can really bring in individuals from your organization into the legal team who've been handling responses to customer requests or are just able to react to things like that. And then have them be ramped up on the business, bought into the mission, bought into the goals of the company, and serve as really well-functioning members of the legal team.
Great. Catherine?
And to piggyback on that, I think litigation suffers from the bad reputation as being the cost center of the company and not a profit generator. And so while we have a P&L we're trying to balance, there's not a lot of P to our L. So one thing that our company has really tried to do is look at where our costs are really coming from and where we can make strategic investment in bringing some of that cost in-house. One thing that really came across during the last panel was the prevalence of data and all the data we have. And from a litigation perspective, I think the more data you have, the more money it's going to cost to deal with. I'm sure Jamie can speak to that as well. But if you bring in certain discovery functions in-house, there's an initial cost to it that can really translate, however, in long-term cost savings. And so that's one area we've tried to focus on, is looking at what our recurring discovery type costs are, what functions we can bring and build a team dedicated to that. It saves costs for smaller matters, but even with larger matters, it makes us a better partner when we do partner with our vendors and our law firms.
Great.
You know, I feel like, Josh, I should have sat in between you and the in-house
Yeah,
folks.
that's right.
And tried to referee that conversation a little bit. But to your point, Catherine, and certainly Clinton, referring back to the need to augment our delivery models as service providers, number one, but also augment our commercial models, because we need to fall in line with the plan to make your offices more of a business partner to the organization and really plug the gap in that black hole, which is more of the L than the P. And so I think strategically it's up to us as service providers to be working with Josh and firms that are asked to assist so that we can allow them to really hyper-focus on the high-level work, not to say that the e-discovery part of that, or any, quite frankly, alternative legal services are low-level work, because they're really not. But I think, as we'll hear today, that idea of a partnership between the three separate sort of organizations or swim lanes that are sitting up here today is really what we need to do a better job of as an industry.
Yeah, and speaking from the perspective of outside counsel, I mean, we really try to partner with our clients. Obviously, different clients have different needs. Certainly, I've noticed in my own practice a lot more routine litigation being taken in-house. And, we try to, be responsive to the needs of our individual clients. Obviously, a lot of matters are not going to rise to the level where you're going to, pay big firm rates. But, there will be obviously certain matters that do. And so we really try to work closely with in-house counsel to determine if a particular matter is going to be a good fit for us. A lot of my practice as well is, counseling in the first instance to try to anticipate, developments in the law, look at where future litigation risks may arise, and try to prevent those things from coming about in the first place. So the other thing is, I think one other area where this has had an impact is we really, I'm in touch with my clients almost on a daily basis on things like budget, staffing, and it's actually great to have the in-house folks really involved as they want to be. But certainly we, want to understand the pressures that the in-house, that the legal department is under, and want to work with you guys and work with outside vendors in appropriate circumstances to keep costs down, be efficient, and minimize litigation risk, and ultimately get the best result at the lowest cost.
So cost is a word that you guys have been throwing around from different angles. How have you been able to cut costs, and what costs are you not able to get rid of? With Catherine.
So I like to think of it as investment. I think we oftentimes are concerned about the day-to-day number of hours billed on a matter, but I think it's worth taking a longer-term approach from an in-house perspective to really look at not this matter or that matter, but look at what your long-term goals are for the business and where the cost investment makes sense. Like Jamie and Josh were saying, a lot of the advisory work that goes into it. You may not want to pay up front for a legal memo, but that legal memo may be a real cost savings down the road if it provides you with the impetus to go to the business unit and make some changes that are going to save you litigation down the road. So I'm not really sure the answer to your question of where you can cut costs and where you can't. You can never cut costs completely, right? That's why we have a large budget in our organization, and I think that's the same for everybody. It's really managing and looking to make strategic investments in order to curb that long-term cost growth.
Yeah, and I think that also speaks to then we're not just talking about savings from a cost perspective, but maybe from a process perspective as well. Jamie, is that something you can comment on?
Yeah, I certainly like to hear Catherine talk about cost being an investment, right? But one thing that we need to do, I think, as an industry is be more creative about how we come up with those investment plans or cost strategies and methodologies. I think everyone in this room has probably been involved in a discovery conversation with a service provider that started with a rate card, right? And we all know how difficult it is to sort of match those line items up and try to figure out where are we spending our money, right? And also, how much value are we delivering back to those organizations? Because it's not just enough for our industry to sort of, be an order taker. We need to provide value just as Josh and his firm is providing value back to those organizations as well. And so if we look at sort of changing the model and becoming more in line with fixed fee models, whether we look at consumption-based models or subscription-based models, we have to figure out a way to help, again, folks like Clinton and Catherine be better corporate citizens. And I think changing the way we price our services and looking at how we deliver value back to them is something that will put them in a better position. And walking in with a partner like Josh and with a firm like Gibson is probably a great start, right? Because if we can start to bundle our services together and recognize that we each have an area of expertise that needs to be highlighted, but without one, we can't have the other, I think that's probably a good conversation starter.
Though I will say, just on the cost issue, I do think that it's, especially with your outside service providers, you should be able to drive costs down.
Sure.
And the reason why I say that is, and I'm sure most of us have experienced this, we're getting rates raised every year. So it can't just be one way, right? It can't be, hey, it's January 1st. It's about time for us to raise our rates by the, whatever it is every year. And then we're somehow in a position where we can't manage to cut costs. I think that that's just not the reality of the situation. And so you have to find ways to either continue to drive those rates down or peg them. Though one of the ways that I suggest that you do that is by consistently looking for alternative service providers. I think that the benefit that some companies are seeing from very long-term relationships with firms is not necessarily worth continuing to pay ever-increasing rates for organizations that are basically built on turnover. And so, to look at much lower cost service providers to handle the vast majority of your work and then hire the Gibson Dunns of the world, in the few instances in which they're qualified to do the work and are needed to do the work. And it's just, I think, fewer and far between, especially, like I said, and not to hammer on this, but in light of the insane pay that these people are getting at these law firms. I mean, $25,000 summer bonuses for being there is just sort of offends the sensibilities of an organization where you are not a revenue driver. And so it just, it's imperative that we be constantly driving costs lower in whatever ways that you can.
And Clinton, if I could just comment, it's interesting certainly to hear you say that, but it's on us, again, as the service provider industry to make sure our interests align with yours. And so I would argue that long-term relationships, if they're set up properly, where you're driving value back to your customer, whether that's monthly, quarterly, annually, or on a per project basis, and highlighting where you're delivering that value back to them, that could really be a rock solid foundation about how to really partner together. Because if we approach this sort of issue looking at it from a partnership perspective, we should be able to align interests together, and we should be able to pass on our efficiency bonuses to you, and work in a way where we recognize your challenges and what you're being taken to task to do from your organization and help you be successful in that, right? And I think, again, relying on a firm like Gibson and folks like Josh to be able to plug the gaps where we need them to, provided that you use the right associate right at the right billable hour, would certainly be a partnership that I think would go a long way in helping you as a GC achieve your goals.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that legal service providers do a pretty good job at positioning themselves differently than other service providers to a company. you'll often hear them, and it's not to say that I disagree or think that it's disingenuous, but you'll hear legal service providers refer to themselves as partners, when really they're just another vendor. And I think that the more that you can think of them as a vendor and drive them in the same way that you're going to drive your other vendors who are providing just as important of a service to your company, then you can have that sort of different mindset. Now, that's not to say that I don't believe in long-term relationships. I just got married. But I do think that it's really important that it not be a one-sided conversation, and that you're not sort of, treating your service providers in the way that oftentimes I think that they're looking at you as a company, which is a source of revenue.
All right, so
Clinton
is firing guns, so I was going to say, Josh, on behalf of all of the suffering large law associates and partners, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say. I mean, I think, obviously we're not appropriate, Gibson Dunn and comparable firms are not appropriate for every matter. It's going to be case specific. We're certainly, aware of these issues, and we do have alternative fee agreements with a lot of clients. We do, from fixed fees with success premiums. I mean, we're want to be responsive to our clients in this regard. Again, in terms of the associate raises, ever since I think when I was starting out, they were like at 90,000, and now then they jumped to 125, and so I mean, that's the market's always been that way. It always goes up over time. From the big firm perspective, we're all competing to retain the best talent, right? The Gibson Dunns of the world, we want the best law students from the best law schools who are going to provide the best, be the best lawyers and provide the best legal services to all of you. But again, and with a lot of companies we work with, we really do try to invest in a longer-term partnership, learning the business, so that ultimately, even though compared to other segments of the legal market, our rates may be higher, in the end, the goal is to get you guys the best possible result at a reasonable cost. And of course, obviously, I mean, a lot of our litigation that we handle is bet the company litigation or huge exposure. So anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things at Bloomberg Law that we think about is how technology can serve as an equalizer too for the smaller law firms to compete, for the smaller companies to compete. Maybe Catherine, if you could talk a little bit about how technology is coming into play, and then also maybe about how maybe even analytics, if that's part of what the analysis is that gets done.
Data is really important to us. When you don't know how much you're spending on large bucket categories, it's kind of hard to peg what a certain case should cost. I think for litigators, we generally know a motion to dismiss should cost this much, but when you don't have the data to back that up, it's really hard to see where you're getting value, how many hours is appropriate. I mean, I'm sure, Josh, you would totally back me up on this, that is it better to have 2 partner hours at $8.95 or 20 associate hours at $2.95? That kind of valuation really requires on data. So we've pushed our outside counsel to do their least favorite thing, and that's use the cost task codes when they bill. But we've actually taken those codes and worked with a program to really analyze where our costs are coming from, and that's from soup to nuts. That's given us a bigger picture over the kinds of cases we actually have. Those little cases that you're mentioning may not be appropriate for a large law firm. When you have a lot of those, you may have cost savings by giving them to one national counsel at a higher rate because they can do them effectively. But you don't know what you don't know until you get that data in there. And so we've really made a concerted effort to look at every penny that we're spending, what we're spending it on, and we're asking our outside counsel to partner with us to help us by using these task codes efficiently so we can really kind of get to that look.
Jamie, following up on what Catherine is saying, how have you seen in your various engagements in serving as the bridge between law firms and in-house counsel that technology is playing a role?
Yeah, so I think there are three quick items, right, to touch on there. One is we constantly see corporations bringing back some of the things that we used to do as an industry, but behind their firewall. Collection certainly is one of them. Early case assessment with the advent of technologies that can be installed behind the corporate firewall. And if you have an E5 or an E6 license in Office 365, and you have the resources and the training for those resources to be able to run those types of things in-house, that certainly makes things more efficient, right? It drives costs down because you're taking on those types of activities internally, and you're really trying to narrow the data sets down that you hand over the wall to an organization like Integrion. The second piece is, and I think this is what Catherine was getting to, is we need to be better as an industry helping feed your business analytics engines. It's refreshing to hear Catherine talk about tracking every penny from a discovery standpoint, because we strive to also give those key metrics and those KPIs right back to those organizations, because it just helps us budget and it helps us come to more of a fixed fee model for services that we render, and allows us to look at the usage of various service area buckets, right, to drive either an annualized contract, right, that we know what they're going to use, and to try to use lower rates than we did last year, Clinton, to hopefully fuel those. And then the third is really the tech that service providers have, continued to increase in their arsenal. I'm a firm believer that technology should be looked at as an enabler to people and process. It shouldn't be something that we put all of our eggs in that basket, but it's really the combination, and this isn't an old adage, it really is people, process, and technology, and it's the cohesion between those things that really drive efficiencies, I think, when we offer our services out to corporations, and certainly to law firms that we partner with who are working with those corporations.
Right, and Josh, sort of a similar question. Right or wrong, and I say this also as a law firm refugee, litigators have a bad rep and sometimes as being risk averse. So when seeing the next new thing come out, whether it's technology or an alternative service provider, so how, either if you want to talk about you or your firm, because how are you embracing these types of changes and technology? What are you seeing?
We have a group at Gibson called Global Practice Services, in which we've invested millions of dollars over the past several years, which is really just dedicated to e-discovery, processing and analyzing large amounts of data. We have an analytics tool that we use. We use things like predictive coding in appropriate cases for litigation. So I really rely upon, those people are subject matter experts in this. Most of them are not lawyers. And so I rely upon them to a significant degree when we have, say, a large piece of litigation as to the best way to set up a document review platform, figure out the most important documents of the case, collection. A lot of our clients have started doing their own collections now, and do have their own in-house e-discovery people, which is great, actually. I mean, it's good to have that sort of internal process that's standardized. Our global practices service, I'll also really rely upon them to vet a lot of the outside vendors, because litigators, I mean, that's not the main thing we're doing most of the time. So, but we certainly are trying to leverage, whether it's AI, machine learning, the latest technologies, because a big part of the litigation is obviously the cost of discovery and the massive volume of data and whittling that down to the key documents in the case. So those are things that we're definitely aware of, and are aware of, through the use of technology, a way to bring down cost, hopefully, in discovery.
Great.
Darby, if I could add just a quick point there. I was having a conversation with someone last night about this. I often think about, when I went to law school, right, we weren't taught about how to do any e-discovery, right, in a practical sense. We weren't taught about how to do document review using technology. Certainly, back in the early 2000s, didn't have an idea of what it meant when you had to image a hard drive. And so I think we, again, collectively, as not only an industry, but as the legal profession, need to do a better job of teaching soon-to-be lawyers at the law school level about practical application of technology. We need to do a better job of teaching them what the tool sets are going to be that they're going to need to rely on to support clients like Sunrun and T-Mobile in the future. And I think we need to start to look at the shift in sort of the education system at the law school level to include those types of things, especially practical application of technology, because I think it'll just put them in a better situation when they get, when they walk in the door their first day at Gibson Dunn, they're already, trained document review folks and understand the vernacular when we talk about an e-discovery project.
Yeah, you're not alone in that, Jamie. The ABA, maybe many of you know this, has added as part of, and their kind of general rules, this duty of this ethical responsibility to understand technology. And I think to date, it's 31 state bars have adopted it. So certainly we all as practitioners are starting to see that, and perhaps as today's lawyers get younger and younger and they're growing up on Google and Facebook and Twitter and all these sort of things, that should be part of the law school curriculum.
Totally agree.
Okay. So Clinton, we've heard a little bit from you about some of your concerns when you're looking at service providers and how to drive them. Can you talk a little bit about what are you looking for when you're looking for outside counsel, and how do you put together a team like that?
Sure. I think, probably similar to everyone here, you're looking for people who understand and really internalize the goal and mission of your business. We've actually done a few things to try to bring firms up to speed on their time, to really make sure that they're understanding what we're doing as a business and where we're going so that they can understand the risk areas and counsel properly. So we've hosted a core counsel forum where we've brought in law firms that we use or practitioners that we use and given them full day presentations from different executives on different initiatives throughout the company. And then the other thing we do is we spend time with our law firms, more junior associates and even summer associates, because we know that those people are either going to be working on our matters at some point in the future, or are people who we're potentially going to employ down the road, as they work through law firm, and then, sometimes people go the in-house route. And so it's just a good way to continue to, drive people to understand what we do, how we do it, and what the expectations are when we do that. But, more simplistically, I'm looking for an expert much more than a general practitioner for most of the things that I do, because most of the things that I do, I don't feel like are novel and should be able to be answered in a pretty quick phone call. And so oftentimes I'm looking for, the person in the area who can handle, whatever random fact pattern that I'm being presented with my business partners.
Great. And Catherine, I saw you, nodding along that, and you somewhat recently, right? It's been 2 years or?
Almost 2, yeah.
Almost 2 years, made this switch from working in firm to going in-house. So what are you looking for from outside counsel, and how do you make that decision?
So one thing that the perspective really helped me, the move helped me bring into perspective, is the fact that when I was outside, I always considered the in-house counsel my client. But the in-house counsel has their own set of clients, and that's the business. So now, as I'm looking for partners in law firms, I'm looking for someone who can understand not just my concerns as a litigator, because you're right, I'm super risk adverse, but also my business team's concerns, because ultimately they're the actual client, right? I'm just the conduit. And there's times to be risk adverse, and there's times to be bold, and trying to find a partner who can help you navigate that and also help you find a way to get to yes. Because my clients don't like no. My clients want to find a way to do that new innovative thing. They want to find a way to be even more uncarrier than they already are. And finding a partner who really understands the ultimate business need behind whatever legal problem I'm presenting with them, that's important. And also looking beyond just whatever, sometimes it's advice, sometimes it's an active litigation. Sometimes you can win an active litigation pretty easily with one strategy that will ruin the rest of the business because now you're locked in that strategy. So really being able to take that kind of global view of every decision. How does it fit in with your company's vision?
Great. So one of the things when we were prepping to talk about this, and we were talking about how to think about outside counsel, was Clinton, you had mentioned not to be afraid of moving beyond the AmLaw 200 and to look at smaller firms. I guess can you just talk a little bit about how do you get comfortable with doing that if it's not a known quantity?
Yeah, we've done it a few different ways. One is the easiest is to get referrals to big law refugees. Either partners who you worked with or are familiar with your company who used to be at Gibson Dunn and now have created Clinton Meow LLC, which is really just one person. The other group of people that we've really gotten comfortable using are people who were at law firms, then went in-house, and then created their own shop. And we've found a lot of success in doing that. But as I'm sure folks here are aware of, it's hard to do. It's hard to find efficient, low-cost providers. And so one of the things that's on my goals for every year is to constantly be working to find those providers. And so it's going to events like this, it's going to other networking events, it's going to ACC to find and talk to your colleagues about who they're using, because there is no list like the AmLaw that you can find, wait, this is a really great provider. And so I have found that it's just a lot of shaking hands and talking to your colleagues, unfortunately. Or fortunately. I look forward to talking to all of you.
Can I toss out one resource that you might consider? This is something that we'd all talked about on the phone previously too. Diversity plays a big role in when we're looking for both counsel within an established relationship, but also new counsel. And there's the National Association of Minority and Women-Owned Law Firms, and they offer conferences throughout the country. They're great. They have networking events that happen in various local places. I've found that a really great way to find exposure to smaller firms that are already vetted, and then also have that great goal of fostering our goal of promoting diversity at all levels of the legal path.
Great. Well, since you brought it up, and then Josh, you too as well, can you talk a little bit about the diversity initiatives that your company is doing, and then we'll hear from Josh about how that plays out at his firm as well.
Oh, I keep using the word partner, but I really do mean it. We have made an effort to partner with our colleagues that are outside counsel, because we know that the business generation is the move upward for attorneys at the law firm. And so if we can foster that client development with your younger attorneys and us being the client, we know that we're creating a path up for them. But similarly, the path up in-house as well is also having the right network connections and having the best advice in the room. So that partnership can go both ways. And so we've made a concerted effort to look at who we're working with, on what cases we're working with them, and making sure that the credit is flowing across that, to make sure that the law firm knows, okay, this young female associate was a rock star, and she really got a great result for us. And I don't just tell her that, and I don't just tell the team leader that, I tell the relationship partner at the firm. Because I really think that partnership can benefit everybody.
Yeah, and for us, it's extremely important. It's the first sentence in our billing guidelines that we request that firms present us with teams that are led by and sort of client-facing ways, women and attorneys of color. It's really critical to what we do, and we've found great success with it. The way that we quantify it is we, at the end of every year, ask our firm, whatever firms we're working with, to submit the form that shows, who's working what number of hours on your matters, and then we, see and cut that data across our firms, across partners and associates, and we sort of blind show our firms what those results are and what our expectations are. And so just like the other parts of the business, we're pushing our firms to meet, very specific goals. We have not gotten into what some of the other companies do, like Microsoft, where you're paying back some amount of discount. But we aren't just sort of saying it. We are really trying to drive our firms to it, in many ways, because we have not necessarily seen that firms are doing it on their own without the urging of clients. And so, we're taking that role very importantly.
Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an area that the legal industry as a whole has been focused on for at least the past few years. Ever since I was an associate at Gibson Dunn, it's been a focus of our firm, and especially over the past 5 years, we've made really concerted efforts to promote more diverse candidates to partnership. Last year, half of our new partners were women. And over the past 5 years, I think we've added 34 female partners, both lateral and from within the firm. So it's a strong focus. We also have, and I remember clients early in my career really driving a lot of this. And frankly, I think it's helpful because it's helped move the legal industry along when clients are demanding it and insisting upon it. We have a diverse, part of the issue is, identifying diverse candidates when they're younger associates who are talented and have the skill set and have the potential to become partner or, go in-house and be successful. So we have a diverse talent pipeline initiative where diverse attorneys, LGBT, ethnic diversity, female partners or female associates are identified early, and our chief diversity officer will actually present to the executive committee twice a year who some of these folks are, to make sure that they're getting the appropriate opportunities, training, so that when they reach a point in their career when partnership is a possibility, that we have that pool of folks. Parental leave policies, flex time, all of those things are things that we've worked on as well as part of that, to make sure that we do have a more diverse partnership and in the ranks of our associates as well. Partnering with clients is a great way to do it. We do a lot of work with our clients on Girls Who Code,
Organization.
And things like that. So these are conversations that we really welcome. And when I'm staffing a case on a more granular level, it's always a consideration that goes into staffing. And fortunately, we have a lot of incredibly talented attorneys from all kinds of backgrounds, so it's not hard to find great diverse candidates to be on cases.
Just one point, I'd encourage, and I think that all that is very great, and what I would say is that I encourage all of us to not just focus on when people are making partner, which is obviously a big threshold event, but that they're continuing to stay at the firm, because what I think oftentimes can happen is people make partner, and then it's a whole new world, and then you see those people peel off. And so you're ending up seeing at the higher ends of some firms basically look like they've always looked. And so, don't just focus on what law firms are doing and who they're making partner, but who and what they're doing to support the people who are making partner, I think is just as, if not more critical to that sort of emphasis on diversity.
Great, thanks. So just to pull on some of these threads a little bit, the takeaway from this part of the discussion is that when you're building a successful litigation team, one of the factors to consider is diversity, right? Another one that we were talking about is have a team that really understands the needs of your business. Communication can always be key, to figure out what's the proper cadence for how you're going to be talking to each other, and and how often do you need to check in, and what's the billing going to look like. Talking about how technology can fit in. So we know that we're giving a lot to think about for those of you who maybe came today trying to learn about how can you transform your own in-house department. So Jamie, I'm going to laying all of that out for people who are just getting started and are hearing all these sort of things. What would you recommend to them as maybe some of the first steps that they can take?
Well, I think the first thing that you need to look at is your resources within the organization. What do you have at your disposal, or who are the human capital resources that you have in order to take some of these tasks back internally? I think that can certainly cut down on the cost. We know cost is a huge issue that we've talked about. The second thing that I would absolutely hang my hat on is making sure your service providers, whether it's a law firm or whether it's an e-discovery vendor, are providing critical metrics to you, because that's really the only way that you can drive that business analytics conversation and understand what value you're getting back for those services. That is absolutely critical, and you really can't have, I think, substantive conversations that will materially alter or augment your service team at the right price and at the right cost levels without those metrics. So recognizing what you can take on internally, recognizing what metrics that either you need to capture or that your service providers are capturing, and then really the third thing would be making sure that your interests are aligned with everyone that's on that litigation team, and making sure that we all have the best interests of the business owner, right, which necessarily is the end client, because the general counsel's office is beholden to those folks as well. Making sure that everyone's interests are aligned all along the way. That would probably be the top three things that I would focus on.
Okay, great. Or is this the warning that questions are coming?
Very subtle.
I'm looking at the time. So, so how about then, if this is, maybe this will be our last question, why don't we go ahead and jumping off of what Jamie said, if the rest of you can sort of, answer sort of the same thing. How should someone who is new to this get started? Or alternatively, what takeaway do you want to leave them with? So let's just go Josh and then make the way down.
One takeaway, I think firms like Gibson want to partner with our clients. And, it's not a good experience for a client if you win a case, but they have a huge bill and they never call you again. So it's not in our interest to do that. So we want to have long-term relationships and sort of fill in where it's appropriate for us to fill in, obviously handle big cases, do counseling that hopefully prevents litigation from arising down the road. And so that's, so work with us. We are not your adversary. We don't want to be thought of as just another service provider. And, I think there are obviously a lot of instances where having our expertise can be helpful. Certainly the subject matter expertise Clinton was focusing on earlier, that's obviously something that's important to us. And also use us as a resource if there are matters that are smaller, that are not appropriate for us. We have a huge network of former colleagues and people that we know. So I'm oftentimes having a client coming asking about a case that's not appropriate for us, but I can send them to someone who, hey, this person is a former Gibson associate or partner, they're top notch, and you'll get a good result on this case. So think of us as your partners.
My advice would be to think of the litigation department as one business unit within the wider business, and think about your cost in terms of profit and loss, but think about it on ROI, return on investment. Think about your vendors as business partners and your law firms as business partners. Looking at problems as the business goes out and does market research. Well, we have to do our own investment and our own research as well in order to make the best legal decisions. So I think not focusing it so much as litigation as firefighting, but litigation as a problem solver. and as a business. So.
Great.
I'll keep mine short. Drive those costs down. Just constantly drive those costs down.
All right, well, with that, Susie, what do these fine folks want to know?
These fine folks have a number of questions. The first one is sort of directed toward Catherine and Clinton. You mentioned in-house litigation spending as an investment. What are some of the specific investments that you would recommend to reduce outside spend downstream? And they had suggested perhaps records and information management personnel, or perhaps types of software.
Data is really where it's at. So we haven't talked about records management, but that's a big problem for a lot of companies, because the mindset of most people is just to save it. You might need it later until you get the class action, and then you have to go and get everything that everybody saved for the last 20 years. So investing in that records management policy, and that's where some good legal advice can come in. Investing in some e-discovery folks, I really think that's a really big investment that's worth making, and I think actually makes our partnership with our vendors so much better. We still have to use outside vendors, obviously, to do a lot of the heavy lift, but when you have an expert who already knows where the data is, who already knows what our systems are, you're not starting from scratch every time. So those are two really great investments I would highly recommend.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I would say that everything that you get from your outside counsel, you should be thinking about how you can make that a template or a form. I think that more times than not, you can create letters or responses or proofs of claim where you can A, B, C, D, and instruct people on what parts go where, and that, while not a big ticket, will save you a lot of time and also really lever the work that you're getting from your outside counsel.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I mean, having a database of settlement forms, right? Oh, that's a consumer slip and fall. I got a settlement agreement for that. That's a privacy case. I got a settlement agreement for that. Or interrogatories, a database of interrogatories, because you probably answered the same questions over and over again. And if I can save your associates time, it's actually a good thing for you too.
Yes, it is.
So.
And I'll just add, when companies like Catherine's have those e-discovery professionals behind the firewall, it makes our lives much easier. When there's an informed strategy about e-discovery already in existence inside the organization, that just makes the relationship much easier to get through, because it's going to be a tough road to hoe. And when we have folks that understand the company's policy around e-discovery, the company's policy around data, where the bodies are buried, that is certainly very helpful in the grand scheme of things.
And to make sure that I get dinner tonight, I just want to say also, would you want to invest in your legal technology providers like Bloomberg Law? Because when you're talking about trying to get these forms and documents like that, you have access to them through a Bloomberg Law subscription. So they're just thinking about, rather than spending those billable hours, how your own staff could use a tool to get that information.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think we have time for one more question. So what factors do the panelists examine when thinking about bringing litigation in-house? Is it based on the volume, frequency, the ease of the tasks, or other criteria?
You want to take that one?
I would say it's all of those criteria, though I tend to think that most of the stuff that companies see, if it's big enough to go to a firm, like Gibson Dunn, it's likely to not be something that you're going to confront maybe again. But for the vast majority of things that you are confronting, I do think that it's stuff that you can handle. I think that if you align your litigation team to the needs of your business, so if you're employee heavy and you have in-house employment lawyers, you're just going to be able to do much more of that stuff. So I don't necessarily think it depends on the complexity of the matter as much as what you can handle and what your business needs are.
Repeatability, I think, is if you're seeing the same matters over and over again, that may be an indication that you are going to be able to get the team together for it. Something you mentioned earlier at the very beginning, trying to avoid those repeatable litigations in the first place also. So if you have, IP is kind of its own different world. I know we have an IP panel, so I'll save that for them. But when you have consumer actions, really looking at what's driving those, and then maybe trying to work with the business to take away that pain point, right? Solving the customer pain point first, and then you have less litigation.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Well, thank you guys very much, and thank you to the rest of the panel.
Thank you to Clinton, Catherine, Josh, Jamie, and thanks, Susie. And
You're welcome.
back to you.
Great.